Have you ever wondered if there's more to the royal family than fancy titles and big palaces? What if a quiet young woman could change everything, not by being loud, but by being true to herself? Get ready, because the story you're about to hear will make you think differently about power, duty, and what it really means to be royal. After Queen Elizabeth's special home was given to Lady Louise, Camilla's family got very mad and couldn't believe it. This one thing made the royal family's power shift. But what Lady Louise did next changed everything. On January 28, 2026, a paper from Clarence House came out that no one expected. The news was short and simple, but it shook up the whole country in just a few minutes. For many, many years, people talked about secret royal lands hidden away. Now, for the first time, the palace said one of those secret places was real. And it wasn't the king's anymore. It was surprising not just because of the land, but because of who got it. It was given to Lady Louise, who was 22, quiet, and Queen Elizabeth II's granddaughter. She now owned a secret mountain house that almost no one knew about. People inside the royal family only talked about it in secret words. The rest of the world never even knew its name. So, what was this place? Keep watching to find out. The secret place is called Grey House by trusted helpers. It is deep in the Scottish mountains near the big hills of the Cairngorms. Grey House is about 200 acres of rough land. It is far from main roads, hidden by trees and more. There are no signs for tourists, no travel books listed. Pictures from space show only a house with a gray roof that blends into the misty land. This house was never meant to be fancy like Balmoral. It was something else completely. The land was bought quietly in 1952, right after Elizabeth became queen. Instead of buying it as queen, it was bought in a private way through a special setup linked to the Queen Mother's property. This made sure the house stayed out of normal royal papers. It was made to be for her, not for big events. People who used to work there have said it was the late Queen's quiet place. A place where she didn't have a schedule and didn't have to be formal. There she could read important papers without cameras waiting outside. She could walk alone, wearing a simple coat and scarf, free from what people expected of her. It was a part of Scotland where she was just Elizabeth, not the Queen. Not everyone in the family liked it as much as she did. Prince Philip, it is said, thought the weather was too bad and liked places that were more comfortable. Princess Anne and Prince William would sometimes visit the nearby land for riding and outdoor sports, but they almost never stayed the night. Prince Edward is said to have visited only one time. Even King Charles III never felt a connection to the house. Because it was so far away and private, it was easy to forget. And later, it was hard to claim. That distance became important in the weeks before the news came out. Insiders say that members of Queen Camilla's bigger family tried to find ways to get the land. They talked to lawyers. They brought in land experts to check old borders. But their try failed. The house was protected by a private plan made many years ago, and who owned it was already decided. What makes Grey House special is not just its stone walls or beautiful views, it's what is inside. Behind its simple doors is a collection like no other owned by the royal family. Boxes of handwritten diaries, carefully labeled envelopes of letters, film reels, and sound recordings kept in special cases. None of it was put into the official royal records. None of it was meant for people to see. The things were from many years. Letters with world leaders, thoughts written after big historical events, personal ideas never changed by helpers or speechwriters. There are recorded messages for her grandchildren, meant to be opened at special times in their lives. These are not political papers. They are personal pieces of a woman who had to balance her job with her private feelings. Because of old rules about records, queens and kings can choose to keep some personal things out of official control. Once given to a named heir, those things cannot be taken by the government or by future kings or queens. In this case, the person getting it was very clear, Lady Louise. But what made Lady Louise the one to get this house will surprise you. The moment Lady Louise was given the property shocked everyone because no one outside a small group ever thought she would get it. She never looked for attention, never tried to get power, never acted like she was important for the future of the royal family. But the reasons for that choice started many years ago, from a special bond made far from cameras and big events. Between 2018 and 2021, while most of the royal family spent time doing public jobs and private things, Lady Louise quietly spent long times in the Scottish Highlands. At Clarence House, she often stayed long after her cousins and other family went back south. Those months were not full of big parties or fancy dinners. They were quiet days with a routine. She walked with her grandmother early in the morning through hills covered in heather. They drank tea by the fire when rain hit the windows. In the evenings, they sat together in the study looking through boxes of papers that few people had ever seen. These were not official papers for historians. They were personal thoughts, drafts of letters, and old photos carefully wrapped in soft paper. Louise did not treat the job like schoolwork. She listened. She asked good questions. Most importantly, she was quiet and respectful. A former worker later said her presence was calm, not showy. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't talk just to sound good. She simply paid attention without wanting anything back. That quality, which the public didn't notice, meant a lot to the late queen. People who knew the family well say the queen saw parts of herself in her granddaughter. There was a smart mind and a deep interest in history, along with being quiet and careful. Where others might have seen a chance to get ahead, Louise saw a duty. The queen liked that difference. In the fall of 2021, soon after Prince Philip's funeral, a quiet legal step was taken. Without any fuss or announcement, a private paper was signed to make sure the hidden Highland house, known inside as Grey House, would be safe in the future. This made sure the house would stay out of any royal changes or political eyes. The paper had strict rules. Ownership would not move until certain people called trustees had died. The house would stay hidden from government checks and not become part of the crown's land. Most surprisingly, certain parts of the extended family were forever kept from having any claim or access rights. Inside the palace, this plan got a secret name, Article 31. This was a small hint to an important date in the Queen's time as ruler. Only a few people knew it existed. Her lawyer, Princess Anne, her main record keeper, and Prince Edward. Each of them understood how sensitive it was. None of them talked about it more than they had to. At that time, Queen Camilla did not know that such a safeguard had been set up. By 2024, however, quiet questions started to pop up. They were never direct questions about Grey House. Instead, talks came up about whether all royal properties had been fully shared in official papers. It was a careful plan. Asking directly would have made people suspicious. Being curious about rules seemed safer. Those close to the situation think Camilla understood that her power in the long run would be different from Queen Elizabeth II's. She would not have the same old power. If she wanted to leave her mark on the royal family, she would need lasting symbols, places, charities, projects that were important beyond just ceremonies. On January 21, 2026, things came to a head. During a private talk at Birkhall, King Charles II's Scottish home, a plan was shown. The idea was called Working Together to Take Care of It. It would turn the quiet house into a place for cultural things, nature studies, and writers. Plans talked about money for nature, fixing old buildings, and a little bit of tourism. On the surface, it sounded good. Good for nature and helping people, but some insiders wondered what the real goal was. Taking care of it would have meant power. Power would have meant being close, both in place and in meaning, to one of the late Queen's most private refuges. Even before they asked for official approval, early checks had supposedly happened. Nature experts visited the Highlands. Money plans were written down. Ways to use the land were quietly drawn up. When the king saw the plan, he didn't say no right away. Instead, he asked for more checks. Lawyers looked at old agreements again. Land officials checked ownership papers going back to the early 1950s. Meetings were put off, saying they needed to be careful. Then on January 26, a small meeting was held. The king, his main helper, and 2 royal advisors were there. After looking at what they found, the answer was given in a calm way. The house, he said, could not be given to anyone else now or in the future. The statement was calm and polite. It talked about an old private agreement that was outside the king's power. No more explanation was given. Lady Louise's name was not said. The secret of Article 31 was not told. To people watching from outside, the talk seemed normal. Inside the palace walls, its meaning was very clear. A line had been drawn years ago, and it would not be crossed. Those present later said the mood was calm but very firm. The king's words were final without being mean. The legal rules left no room to change things. When the meeting finished, Camilla reportedly stayed calm, but she understood that something big was hidden. A plan started long before she asked her questions, and in that quiet understanding, the truth got closer to being public. So keep watching, because this is where it gets really interesting. 3 days after the tense meeting in Scotland, the news was confirmed. On a cold January morning in 2026, Buckingham Palace put out a carefully worded notice that was very important. The quiet mountain house, talked about in private for a long time, had not been given to a trust, nor split among older royals. It had been given fully to Lady Louise Windsor, not to her father, Prince Edward, not to a charity, not shared, to her alone. The late Queen Elizabeth II had finished her private will in the fall of 2021, just weeks after a very personal anniversary of her rule. That paper, kept secret by old legal rules, named her granddaughter as the only and full owner of the house, known inside as Grey House. The gift included everything that came with it. The land itself, the house, its contents, the old papers kept inside, the work agreements of the small staff, and most importantly, the power to say no to anyone asking for public access. One sentence in the will, simple and clear, showed the Queen's wish. The house was to stay a safe place, not something to show off. Those who knew her well said it showed her character perfectly, thoughtful, careful, and not swayed by pressure. It is perhaps good to remember that she always made a clear difference between what belonged to the royal family and what belonged to her as a person. For members of Camilla's wider family, the news felt huge. Plans had already started quietly around the Highlands. Early talks about food festivals and working with old traditions had happened. There had even been early talks about seasonal events celebrating local food near the house. Within hours of the palace statement, those talks got more intense. The will had closed every door. Inside royal circles first came disbelief, then anger. Some had thought the house would eventually be part of bigger plans. Others believed it might stay unused under shared management. Instead, the late Queen had drawn a final line and made it legally unbreakable. Calls were made to lawyers all over London and beyond. The answer was the same. The will had been written very carefully. There was no weak point, no way to twist the words. The way it was set up protected the gift from being challenged. At the center of the problem was Queen Camilla, dealing with a truth that years of working for the royal family could not change. Working hard didn't mean you inherited things. Power didn't cancel out private wishes. But here comes the twist. You see, while others reacted to the news, Lady Louise herself was not surprised. Months before, in the summer of 2025, people near Glenmore had seen a young woman arriving quietly in the area. She wore simple outdoor clothes, traveled without many people, and was only with one quiet bodyguard. When local people talked to her, she said she was studying how land was managed and about nature in the Highlands. In truth, her visits had a deeper reason. With help from two old experts on old papers and a main royal advisor, she was learning how to take care of things. She checked rules for keeping delicate letters safe. She learned about running a property, from paying staff to following land use rules. She looked at the careful balance between privacy laws and who gets things next. One teacher later said she saw the job not as something special, but as something she had to do. She asked careful questions. She took very detailed notes. She understood that owning Grey House meant taking care of memories. When the transfer officially happened, there were no public parties. The change first appeared as a quiet update in the country's land records. Only days later did the palace say what had already happened. The effect was huge. Lady Louise was no longer just a quiet young royal studying. She had become the keeper of a personal history record that ministers, trustees, or even ruling kings and queens could not touch. In a symbolic way, she now had power in one area that worked independently of the royal court's rules. She didn't get to that point alone. Her strongest helper through all this was Princess Anne. Being practical and not overly emotional, Anne handled the practical side of the transfer quietly and well. Staff salaries were paid through a special fund she managed. Sensitive papers were moved safely. During a private meeting in Scotland, she personally gave Louise a sealed envelope with the final codes for the house's inside security system. When questions about rules later came up in unofficial ways, Anne's answer was short and firm. The wishes of a queen, once legally put into action, could not be changed. Louise's mother, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, played a quieter but just as important role. Instead of being in open fights, she worked behind the scenes. Money checks aimed at Louise's property were looked at and stopped if needed. Possible leaks about where the house was were stopped before they were printed. Security teams were quietly made stronger. Those careful steps proved necessary. In late 2025, computer security experts linked to Edward's office found attempts to map the house's borders using flying drones. Hidden cameras were found near paths into the woods. None got inside the property's main grounds. These tries were quietly stopped. Even Prince Edward got pulled into the final tense moments. In November 2025, a request was reportedly made to put off the public announcement for the sake of family peace. His answer, according to those who know the talk, was direct. His daughter's job was not just for show or for a short time. That ended the argument. The paper stood. The will stayed secret, and for the first time since Queen Elizabeth II died, the balance of power around one of her most personal legacies changed forever. There was no party, no big show. Only the quiet certainty that the late Queen's final decision had happened, exactly as she wanted. But it didn't end there. A week after the inheritance became public, something small, almost quiet, changed the feeling again. On February 6, Lady Louise Windsor walked into St. Columb's Chapel, an old stone church hidden on a small road a few miles from the quiet house. The chapel had been there for hundreds of years, its walls worn by wind and rain, its wooden seats smooth from many hands. She arrived without a fuss. No reporters waited outside, no long line of cars blocked the road. One car dropped her off and left. She walked the last part alone, her coat buttoned against the cold. But there was one small thing no one missed. Pinned to her dark blue coat was a pin that even old royal watchers didn't know. It was small but special. A circle of Scottish heather flowers wrapped around an English rose, joined in the middle by a tiny blue gem shaped like a shield. On the back, later seen through careful photos, were 4 words carved in, "Steadfast beyond applause." History experts quickly knew the words. They had appeared in private notes written by Queen Elizabeth II to a small group of family, including Princess Anne and Prince Philip. It was never used in public. It wasn't a slogan. It was a reminder. The message was very clear. Inside the chapel, Louise put a small bunch of white flowers under a simple stone sign for her grandmother's many years of service. There were about 40 people there, local church members and helpers attending what was called a small community fundraiser. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady. "The crown gave this place to me," she began. "It is not a prize to show off. It is a job to protect. I have it not because of my position, but because of what I was taught, that helping others is strongest when it is quiet." She paused, looking not at the few cameras in the back, but toward the altar. "We cannot change memories to make things easy. We keep them safe with care, even when it asks for patience instead of praise." The video of her words spread fast on social media every day. Within hours, it became one of the most replayed royal moments of the year. When she finished talking, she bowed her head toward the carved stone with one of her grandmother's thoughts. "Duty gives meaning to power, not the other way around." The meaning was clear without being dramatic. Later that evening, Princess Anne put out a rare public note of her own. It was short. "Lady Louise does not speak for wanting more," it read. "She speaks for things staying the same." The reaction was instant. King Charles III quietly cancelled 2 events and went back to Scotland for private talks with Prince Edward. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla was seen entering Clarence House without saying anything, her face worried. Someone later said that many had thought the family would stick together behind the scenes. Instead, people seemed to rally around Louise. News headlines quickly followed. "Quiet strength makes royal power new. A new voice without the noise." Even Catherine, Princess of Wales, quietly added her voice. She posted a handwritten message online. "Inheritance is not ownership, it is stewardship." The post got millions of reactions in an hour. Behind palace walls, the change was clear. Helpers inside St. James's Palace met to think about the bigger effects. Louise's role, though not an official title, was becoming important in a cultural way that went beyond formal ranks. Importantly, Prince William, Prince of Wales, was said to see this moment not as a fight, but as support. According to a senior helper, he said privately that she was showing the values they had all been taught to respect. For many people, Lady Louise had changed from a quiet granddaughter to a moral leader, someone showing an idea of royalty based on being careful rather than being seen. But good things rarely go without challenge. Within days, Queen Camilla showed a new public plan called Service in the Modern Age. The start was held in the Grand Windsor Castle in one of its oldest halls. The display showed modern royal work, with photos, recorded speeches, and stories highlighting her charity work. The timing made people wonder. It was announced less than an hour after details came out about a shared project between Louise and Princess Anne to save less-known parts of royal history from the mid-1900s. Camilla's speech talked a lot about being seen. Service, she said, must be seen to be understood. The difference was clear. Princess Anne, when asked by reporters, simply said, "Understanding does not always need a big show." The king did not go to the display opening, saying he had a medical check already planned. Only less important family members and invited guests were there. Public reaction was quiet. Critics said the display was fancy but cold. People online compared it badly to Louise's honest speech at the chapel. Then Catherine shared another post. This time a real picture of Louise and Anne sitting at a long wooden table surrounded by boxes of old papers. The caption said, "Preserving quietly." The number of people liking it went up again. Tension eventually showed more directly. According to stories from those present, a private talk happened between Camilla and Princess Anne in a hallway at Windsor. Their voices were controlled but firm. Camilla reportedly suggested that Louise's growing popularity had been encouraged on purpose. Anne's answer was calm. "Public respect," she said, "cannot be made up. It must be earned." The talk ended without a solution. Within a week, Camilla's display closed earlier than expected, officially blamed on schedule changes in the castle. No more explanation was given. Soon after, the royal website added a new page called Enduring Service, The Unseen Years. It showed personal letters, quiet projects, and stories of dedication rarely in the news. The project was credited to Lady Louise Windsor and Princess Anne. At the top of the page was a line said to be from Queen Elizabeth II, "Dignity lasts longer than showing off." The change was clear. Without open fighting, the story had changed direction. The royal family itself seemed to take in and show the message Louise had given in that small stone chapel. That strength is not in performing, but in being constant. And in the echoing halls of old and new palaces, one truth became clear: power, when honest, speaks louder than any spotlight ever could. And this was seen when big newspapers started calling Lady Louise Windsor the late Queen's spiritual heir. Not in law, not in rank, but in how she acted. Commentators called her the steady heartbeat of the royal family, proof that power doesn't always need to be loud. In a world of constant news, her quietness stood out. Colleges quickly noticed. Invitations came from Oxford University and Cambridge University asking her to speak about duty and modern leadership. Even Harvard University asked her to give a lecture on old traditions and public fairness. For someone who had always avoided attention, the attention was now impossible to ignore. Then came a result that surprised even palace helpers and everyone else. On February 5, a survey from the BBC showed that 71% of people in the United Kingdom thought Louise should get a formal royal title if she chose to do public jobs. In Scotland, even more people supported it, going up to 84%. The numbers were clear. People's trust in her was growing fast. 2 days later, Buckingham Palace said that King Charles III had privately offered her to become Her Royal Highness, Princess Louise, along with a clear job focused on helping young people, saving old traditions, and teaching about being a good citizen. But the offer had conditions. She would need to split her time between Scotland and London. She would get full-time security. She would go through formal lessons and official checks. And she would have to give up her outside jobs, including the horse coaching she quietly loved. Inside the family, people had different ideas. Princess Anne liked the idea but warned that who you are must come before how you look. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, worried less about status and more about pressure. A title, she said privately, means always having expectations. Then tension rose from across the ocean. On February 10, Meghan Markle was on an American talk show and made a clear comment about people being rewarded for quiet advertising instead of clear service. She didn't say Louise's name, but it was clear who she meant. Social media reacted right away. Hashtags asking about the meaning of silence started trending all over the world. The next day, Princess Anne and Prince Edward put out a joint statement. It was calm and direct. Louise had never looked for a position or a platform. She had accepted jobs when needed and stepped back when not, nothing more. Public opinion quickly changed. Many thought the criticism was not needed. Sympathy for Louise grew deeper. On February 14, standing outside the Highland house in falling snow, Louise made her own announcement. She started the Grey House Trust, a separate charity that would protect old records while also helping young leaders who help others without getting credit. Leadership, she said, is not about being seen. It is about being steady. More than 9 million people watched the broadcast. When asked if she would accept the princess title, she paused before answering. She thanked the king for his trust, but explained that duty does not depend on your rank. For now, she said she would stay Lady Louise. Days later, the king sent her a handwritten letter, which was rare. According to helpers, he wrote that her grandmother had believed true strength grows quietly. Louise replied with the same grace, saying she did not look for crowns, only meaning. By mid-February, people agreed that something had changed. A new moral center had formed within the royal family. On one side was being seen and image. On the other was patience and good principles. And as of today, the public had given her an unofficial name, Guardian of Grey House, because in the end, this story was never really about titles or land. It was about helping without applause, protecting without complaining, choosing dignity when being loud would have been easier. Lady Louise did not inherit a throne. She inherited what makes one matter, and that is a true identity. Do you think Lady Louise's quiet rise shows a real change in the future of the royal family? Could her saying no to titles and focusing on duty change what royal leadership looks like in the years to come? Share your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you click on the next video appearing on your screen. You definitely won't want to miss what we find out next.